In the summer of 1994, writer Mike Inslin was at the peak of his career. Mike had written several books that explored haunted places and supernatural phenomena. Despite his interest in these subjects, Mike was actually a skeptic. He believed that all the stories he wrote about were just fiction or commercial gimmicks to attract tourists. While searching for an idea for his next book, Mike received a strange letter in the mail. The letter was unsigned, but its content was intriguing. It read, "If you're looking for real horror, go to room 1408 at the Dolphin Hotel. You won't leave the same way you entered." Mike ignored the letter at first, but he found himself thinking about it more and more. After a few days, he decided to investigate the matter himself. He called the hotel and booked room 1408 for one night. That was the beginning of a terrifying adventure that would change his life forever. On a sunny August day, Mike arrived at the Dolphin Hotel, an old establishment located in the heart of New York City. The hotel had once been luxurious, but it was now worn and dilapidated. As he walked into the lobby, Mike felt something strange, as if the place carried with it the scent of the past and dark secrets. Mike approached the reception desk and informed the clerk about his reservation for room 1408. As soon as he mentioned the room, he noticed a change in the clerk's expression. The clerk quickly called the hotel manager, an old man named Mr. Olin. Mr. Olin arrived within minutes and took Mike to his private office. There, Mr. Olin began to tell Mike stories about room 1408. He said the room had witnessed several mysterious deaths and that people who stayed there either died in horrific ways or came out insane. Mr. Olin tried to convince Mike not to stay in the room, but Mike stubbornly refused. In the end, Mr. Olin reluctantly signed a waiver releasing the hotel from any responsibility and handed Mike the key to the room. Mike took the elevator to the 14th floor. When he arrived, he felt uneasy. The hallways were dark and depressing, as if they had been abandoned for years. Mike walked until he reached the door to room 1408. There was a brass plaque on the door with the number 1408, but it was worn and tarnished. Mike opened the door and entered the room. At first glance, the room looked very ordinary, but it was unnaturally cold. Mike noticed that the windows were tightly shut and there was no sound from outside, as if the room was completely isolated from the world. He began to carefully examine the room. He found a large bed, an old wardrobe, and a wooden desk with an old telephone on it. But despite the room's ordinary appearance, there was something strange in the air. Mike felt as if something invisible was watching him. Mike sat on the bed and began to write down his observations about the room. But soon, he felt something disturbing. The lights began to flicker irregularly, and he started hearing faint whispers coming from the walls. He got up from the bed and began to inspect the place again. Suddenly, he heard a knock on the door. He went to the door and opened it, but found no one. When he returned inside, he noticed that everything in the room had changed. The furniture had moved, the mirror on the wall was cracked, and the atmosphere had become even colder. Mike tried to stay calm and convinced himself that all this was just hallucinations caused by fatigue. But he couldn't ignore the growing sense of fear. As time passed, things got worse. The walls began to crack and emit a foul odor, like that of decaying corpses. The pictures hanging on the walls began to move, as if they were displaying horrific scenes from the past. Mike felt that some dark force was trying to manipulate his mind. In a moment of panic, Mike tried to call the front desk using the old phone, but all he heard were eerie laughs and incomprehensible sounds. He began to hear screams coming from the walls, as if people were being tortured in the next room. Mike began to lose control of himself and started to doubt his sanity. He tried to escape the room, but the door wouldn't open. He felt as if the room was trying to trap him forever. As midnight approached, the events in the room reached their peak. The lights went out completely, and the room became pitch black. The noises grew louder, and Mike started seeing shadows moving in the darkness. In a moment of courage and desperation, Mike decided to confront what was happening. He took a flashlight and began searching the room for the source of these phenomena. He found himself standing in front of a broken mirror, and when he looked into it, he saw his reflection, but with a twisted and terrifying smile. At that moment, Mike realized that he had to get out at any cost. He went to the window and tried to open it, but it was tightly sealed. In a fit of madness, he grabbed a chair and smashed it against the window until it shattered. Mike jumped from the window and landed on a narrow outer ledge. It was the 14th floor, but luckily, the fall wasn't fatal. He felt intense pain in his legs, but he was relieved to have escaped the room. He managed to crawl to the edge of the ledge, where he was rescued by emergency responders who had rushed to the scene after hearing the sound of breaking glass. After that horrific night, Mike was taken to the hospital for treatment. He remained under medical observation for several days, but he couldn't forget what had happened in room 1408. He decided to give up writing horror stories and began to avoid talking about that experience. Several months later, Mike returned to his normal life, but he was not the same person. He suffered from constant nightmares, as if room 1408 was still haunting him. He tried several times to return to writing, but he felt that everything he wrote fell short of the terror he had experienced. In the end, Mike decided to write one last book about his experience in room 1408, but he couldn't finish it. Every time he tried to write, he felt something dark pulling his pen away. Eventually, Mike burned the manuscript and decided to quit writing altogether. Although Mike survived room 1408, his story became the talk of the town. People began to tell tales about the room and how the hotel had permanently closed it after the incident. But rumors say that the room still exists, locked and abandoned in a corner of the hotel. Room 1408 remains one of the most terrifying legends in the history of hotels. It is said that anyone who tries to enter it now will find nothing but darkness and silence, or perhaps something else waiting inside.